He's not even paying attention.
Are
we rolling?
Yes.
Well, hello, my friends. Kevin here, and welcome to The Bottom Line, your go-to source for everything about custom lower trucks. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about rear ends. Before we get any further, please hit that like button and also subscribe to this channel, as that really helps us out. But yeah, with that out of the way, let's continue on. I want to talk about my truck a little bit. My 62 GMC I have behind me has been down for a little bit, but I got some big plans. I have a TCI coilover chassis. It's going to go underneath it, and it also has a Ford 9-inch rear end on it. And if you're not in the know on how things work, you might think that's kind of weird having Ford parts in a GM truck. This truck has a 12 bolt. I just kind of threw in there. I didn't really go through it, so it's kind of nice that the new chassis has that new rear end in it. It actually comes from Currie Enterprises, which is not too far away from where I'm at. So let's go to their shop and see what this rear end is all about. All right, well, I made it to Currie Enterprises here in Corona, California. Just a little short drive for me. I just happen to be that lucky. I'm here with John Henson, and he can explain a little bit more about 9 inches, as you guys specialize in these, right? Even though they're kind of like your own. You guys make them yourselves, right?
Right, so exactly. So basically what we've done is we've taken the Ford 9-inch and made it a Currie 9-inch. So we've developed every part of this so that we can adapt it to almost anything on the market for aftermarket vehicles nowadays. So whether it be a lowered C10, whether it be off-road, drag race, lifted, lowered, we're going to be able to build something that probably fits exactly that application.
Exactly. Now, give me some insight maybe to the origins of the 9-inch and how that became popular, how so many people decided to use that in numerous different vehicles for whatever purposes.
Well, you know, Ford engineered this back in the mid-50s, and then it got started using them in the 50s Ford F-100s, and that was loosely what we kind of based our tried and true Centurion or heavy-duty notchback rear end on, because that particular application was the most desirable for guys back then who wanted to pull them out of a junkyard, narrow them down, and fit them in, say, like their early roadster or hot rod. And then, of course, for drag race applications too, it became the go-to because of a few different reasons. One, because of how easy it was to adapt it to their vehicles that they may be building.
I want to know, for people like me, you know, we kind of keep things, you know, you got a C10, you got a Chevy, GMC, or whatever, you kind of want to keep everything kind of related. But I've seen a lot of people with 9 inches in their Chevys. So why would somebody choose a Ford 9-inch rear end over a 12-bolt, you know, Chevy rear end?
So there's a few different reasons. 3 definitely come to mind first. The number one reason is a C-clip axle versus a bolt-in axle. And if you're not familiar with what that means, basically on an axle shaft in a 10-bolt or 12-bolt GM application, the axle shaft is actually retained in the rear end by a C-clip that grabs it and slides in and out in the center section here. So at the very tip of the axle shaft is a groove, and that C-clip has to line up with it. The problem with that is if you ever have an axle shaft failure, like say an axle shaft snapped, the whole axle and everything that's attached to it evacuates out the side of the vehicle, which is a catastrophic failure. One of the things about a 9-inch that is a huge, huge benefit is it's a bolt-in axle out here on the flange. So if you had an axle failure somewhere inside the middle of the rear end here, because the axle is bolted in here at the bearing flange, there is no way this is going to evacuate out the side. So it keeps everything underneath the vehicle. So that's a huge difference. Another thing that comes to mind is that it's really easy to work on. And so if you kind of see what I have here, this is a third member that is what bolts into the front of your Ford 9-inch. Now, if you wanted to work on it, and say you're at the track, you want to swap out gears because the ratio isn't right for that atmosphere that you're in, or if you break something, you can easily pull out the axle shaft, pull out the third member, work on it on the bench, put it back in, and now you're down the road. So really easy to work on, which is awesome. The other thing that comes to mind is what's called a hypoid gear. Hypoid gear, without being, going crazy into tech, is basically the offset of the ring of the gear, the pinion gear to the ring gear actually sits a little bit lower, and there's a longer contact patch. If you look at this pinion gear in relation to, like, say, a 10-bolt or a 12-bolt, these teeth are super long. and it gets a long contact patch between the two. So the design of the gear actually makes this much more durable and strong than, say, your 10 bolt or 12 bolt design. So that's another thing. So when you really start talking about durability and strength, the Ford 9-inch just beats it in every way. You know, something that I just thought about too, that I'm holding this, is the Ford 9-inch actually has a extra bearing that supports the pinion bearing. It's called a pocket bearing. And if you look way deep down in the case in here, there's an extra bearing that slides on the back side of this. So you've got your yoke that slides on here, and there's a big bearing that sits out here to support your pinion. But then in the middle, all the way towards the back, is going to be a pocket bearing so that there's no movement here. You know, your drive shaft can do what it's doing out here, and this isn't going to have any play. When you have play and things move, that's when things break. So if there's deflection in the middle center section somehow and things start moving around, well, that's when you start breaking teeth on gears, that's when you start breaking lockers, and that's when you have catastrophic failures at the track. So those are all things that I think definitely make a 9-inch stronger than a 12 bolt.
Definitely. Yeah, I could just see more precision, more contact, more just everything on demand when you want it. When you got that power, you can lay it down. My other question is, we talked about some of the internals. What about the housing? Does the housing make it a bit stronger too in the engineering of it?
Well, there's several different housing types. So we like to actually cater the decision on the housing type to the application. For example, this that we're showing here is actually called our Centurion, or some people call it the notchback. It's loosely based on that F100 design. And because of its formed fit and because it has what we call, just tube engagement, so that the actual tube gets pushed into the housing center about 4 inches and then welded here and rosette welded here. So this tube isn't going to rotate inside this center section. Now with a 12 bolt, you have a casted center. And that casted center usually has a press fit as far as the tube goes into it. You'll hear of guys that want to weld that up because they know it's a weakness, right? But that's not how it was done from the factory. So just the fact that that tube isn't actually engaging and a solid piece to the center section means that you're going to have this or you're going to have this, and that's never anything you want in a rear end.
Yeah, more chances for failure, more pieces, more things going on there.
Absolutely.
And even if you're just on the street, you're not racing application, I'm sure that comes into play too, because you never know if you go up a driveway or something like that, or you're going around a corner. I don't know. Something can happen on the road.
Let's talk about an air ride truck.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you're putting a airbag out here somewhere on the tube normally, right?
Yeah.
And as that goes up and down and it's supporting the weight of the vehicle, you don't want it to do this here at any junction, right? You want that to stay completely straight. So you want that structural integrity where your suspension mounts are actually hitting it and where the vehicle is, transferring the load to its suspension. So it's it makes a huge difference in racing and just street applications or hot rod applications or airbagged applications.
Definitely, that all makes sense. All right, well, that sounds amazing on that front. What I want to know is a lot of guys are using modern engines, LS, maybe supercharging them, turbocharging them. Maybe they're using an LT. We're getting numbers like 1,000 horsepower. Guys also have Coyote motors. Same thing there. Some of those have superchargers on them as well, and they have a lot of power on these new engines that they're putting in some of these older trucks and everything. But what I want to find out is, are these rear ends good to hold up to that power? How much power can they withstand?
So all of it. And I say that, kind of jovially, but the reason why I say all of it is because we can actually build a rear end to cater to, 1, the horsepower, but 2, more importantly, is the usage. I always tell customers when they call in, hey, I make 1,000 horsepower, and I say, that's great. What is it going in? What type of tire are you running? And how do you use the vehicle? And so to kind of further expand on that a little bit is, say, for example, you have a supercharged LSA and you make 700 at the tire, similar to the Blazer behind us here. And in doing that, well, what kind of tire do you run? Is it a drag slick that's 15 inches wide and gets launched at the track? In that application, then we're definitely going to want to cater to a 35 spline axle and probably build a fabricated style housing that's gusseted so that there's less movement, right? Because it's going to try to pick those tires up off the ground. In a street application with the exact same motor and a street tire, you're not going to make enough traction to twist anything up. So what really we talk about is twisting forces and what do we need to put up with. So the most important thing to do is be honest with with what you're going to use the application for, and then we can cater to almost anything. So if it's a Jeep on 40s, or if it's a drag raced S10 that makes 1,500 horsepower and launches at the track every weekend, or is it the weekend cruiser? And then we'll take into consideration the horsepower and the traction, and then we'll make a recommendation. But the awesome thing about the 9-inch is it's so flexible that we can actually build it to any one of those applications to make sure that you don't, or have the best chance of not having a failure.
Yeah, and I think that was a lot of questions I had, especially with my truck. Even though I have a chassis that's going to, prepped for racing, but I'm not really going to be racing. Maybe I'll go out there. I mean, I'm going to have an automatic transmission on it. I'm thinking about doing an LS. I had 500 horsepower, or about 500 horsepower in my small block before, and so I want to go up a little bit, but I'm not going to be like 800,000 horsepower. And like I said, I'm only going to be on the track maybe a couple times just to check it out, to see what goes on with it. It's mostly going to be a street application. Maybe I'll do some burnouts or something like that, have a little fun, here and there.
Okay.
We all like to have fun.
Absolutely.
But yeah, and then I think you recommended like a 31 spline, and we went with like a regular housing on it and everything. We didn't go with the full fabricated race version, so we can save some money, because, I mean, honestly, we probably didn't need that in this truck.
Absolutely. Again, you're going to have some fun with it. And autocrossing, yeah, I mean, we always say, hey, are you going to autocross on the weekly? Are you going to autocross on the monthly? Or are you going to maybe go out, once or twice a year? And then take into consideration, okay, how are you really going to use the truck or the vehicle that we're building for mostly, right? So like, if it's going to spend 95% of the time on the street, then we're going to build it for something that can be grown into and something that can be used on the track. But we want to make sure that we're not overbuilding by too much if that's not necessarily what you need. So that was the perfect application. 31 spline axles can handle all the street tire love in the world, horsepower, burnouts. It's going to be able to put up with all of those twisting forces for sure.
All right, now we talked about a lot of the benefits. I want to find out a little bit more about the internals, about the diff itself. What about gearing? How would you go about gearing with somebody and figuring that out?
Sure, so gearing is important, definitely very important. And how we figure that out is, one, the usage question. How are you going to use your vehicle? What is it used for? Do you drive on the freeway? Is a very important question. Also, then what type of motor and what type of transmission do you have? Those two things play a big role too. So, if you have an overdrive transmission, then you're going to, in your final gear, cut that RPM to something that's probably a lot more comfortable on the freeway. And if you don't have an overdrive transmission, turbo 350, turbo 400, something of the like, right, Muncie 4-speed, then you don't have an overdrive. You have maybe a third or fourth gear, but you're 1-to-1 ratio in that final gear. So we want to cater the gear to the application based on what it's going to be used for. If it's going to be driven on the freeway or road toured, driven at highway speeds for a long period of time, then we want to choose a gear ratio based on the overdrive transmission ratio and the overall diameter of the tire of the rear, so that we can cater it to what that customer is hoping the vehicle will do performance-wise at that given speed. So we take all of those into consideration, and then we calculate for the RPM, and then we suggest on our end what we think would be the best gear ratio for that particular vehicle.
Gotcha. So like something like a 370 somewhere, or what, I don't know the exact number, would be probably good for like highway cruising.
It's actually one of our more popular ratios.
Yeah.
So 370 and 350 by far are probably the most popular ratios. Now the reason why they're popular is because overdrive transmissions are popular. So gone are the days where our grandfathers were building big block Chevelles and wanted to only go 1/8 mile, 1/4 mile too, right? So now people really are trying to build trucks and cars to drive. And a 350, 370 with an overdrive in a standard muscle car or a street truck pretty much hit the sweet spot.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm looking for too. I want to drive this thing to events every once in a while, like going to Dino's or something like that.
Absolutely.
For us truck guys, that's kind of like the mecca for like anything C10 related, Chevy related, heading out to there. So I do, that's like a 5-hour trip for me. So, I want to make sure that I get some decent mileage out of it. I want to be able to pass up some gas stations along the way. Well, great on that front and figuring all that stuff out. We've heard a lot of terms like Posi, a limited slip, which I'm a little critical on, because some people always say like Posi they put in their rear end, but it's a limited slip differential. What exactly is that? And you can put one of those in one of these, right?
Yes, absolutely. So the two are almost synonymous because they've been used synonymously for so long at this point. But a limited slip differential is a Posi differential if you want to just kind of dumb it down to be very simple. A limited slip differential basically means how is that differential going to send power left and right, so to the left tire and right tire. And if you have a 100% spool, then your tires are spinning at the same rate. And when you go around corners, you'll get a chirp, 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 and it's not a lot of fun.
Because
Plus,
one's going faster than the other, or it's got a bigger distance to go through and all that
right,
stuff.
absolutely, right. So a limited slip differential is going to basically torque sense what you're doing. So if you're going straight and you need power to continue going straight, it's going to put power to both tires, right? So then that's what a good limited slip differential is going to do. If you have a open differential, it wouldn't do that. If you have a limited slip, then when you go around a corner, it's going to let that one tire, that inside tire, slip at a different rate as the outside tire. So your typical street car or autocross application, road course application, almost anything driven on the street is going to be a limited slip differential, or what we're going to recommend is going to be a limited slip differential. Now, Currie makes our own. We actually make our own called the Currie Twin Track, and it is our own version of a limited slip differential. There's a few different ways to achieve a limited slip. One is with clutches, one is with clutch plates that have teeth on them, and then another one is what's called a helical gear limited slip, what people have nicknamed a worm gear limited slip. And that is by far the most popular way to do it, and that is how we actually build our own. Our Currie Twin Track is a helical gear, worm gear style limited slip, which means it's smooth operating. It is two-tire fire when you want to go straight, and it'll smoothly go around those corners without the need for any sort of additive to the gear oil.
All right, so we know that these rear ends come out of a Ford, or they were based off of ones that came out of a Ford. Now, if I found one on a vehicle and wanted to plant one in a Chevy or a Dodge, would that be pretty easy, or is there like some fabrication we got to do?
Yes, there's definitely fabrication that you would have to do. We actually make application-specific Ford 9-inch rear ends, so if you've got a Chevy, a Dodge, or a Ford, we actually have kits that fit those specific vehicles.
Yeah, so it should be pretty much just slide it right in, and once we configured everything with you, and then that's kind of good to go.
Yes.
All right. Now, what if somebody had a 9-inch in their vehicle? They already have one for you, or wherever, and they want to make some adjustments. They're going to put some bigger wheels on the back, most likely wider wheels, because that's kind of what's been trendy lately.
Yep.
Are they easy to modify from there, or do you need to get a new one?
The best way to do it is to get a new one. To modify it, you would need specific tooling to make sure that everything is straight. So we recommend at that point, if you're going to put that time and labor into it, might as well put the dollars and the time towards a brand new one, because at this point, it's almost the better and more affordable way to go about it. Plus, it's brand new. You don't have to worry about anything that's been fatigued over time.
Yeah, and time is money. You talk about DIY sometimes, and the time you spent doing something, you might as well sometimes pay for that to be done and not have to worry about it. And especially like if you get something done here from Currie, from John, or anything like that, you're going to have that. I mean, you got some guarantee, warranty on.
Yeah, I was going to say it comes with a warranty too, right? So you're going to get a 1-year warranty on this. That it's built to handle what we said it was going to do for you, and that it is tried and true. Everything is straight and going to be a perfect fit.
Yeah, and like I like to stress, you get what you pay for. So when you actually get something that's might be a little bit expensive, but you kind of have a peace of mind that it's not going to break on you or shouldn't break on you, and if you get some warranty on it, that's even a better plus. So we talked about all the goodies. We've got a warranty, got all that stuff from Currie when you buy one of these rear ends. Mm-hmm. Now let's talk about costs. I mean, it's going to be up there. You're going to spend some money on your truck. What are one of these costs typically? A basic setup.
Well, basic setup overall, and say without a brake on it, it's going to put you back about $3,500. That would be like, say, housing axles and a third member of your choice. We can add a brake to that, and then of course the brake cost is going to vary depending on what choice you make. But
honestly, that's not that expensive. To me, putting a rear end, that's pretty much what it's going to cost you, probably even to put a 12-bolt together. I'm going to think it's a lot easier because we can come to you for a 9-inch 12-bolt. Sometimes you have to go to like a specialist sometimes to get one of those. I don't think there's too many companies that are reliable companies that have them already ready to ship for you, right?
No, that's absolutely correct. So a lot of times you'll buy pieces that are just a la carte. They may be shown as a complete crate rear end, but they'll show up in boxes and you didn't know it was going to show up that way. So it's available that way if you decided you wanted to save a little bit of money and do some assembly on your own. But most commonly, if you want a complete crate rear end and the ease of installation with all the bracketry in the right place for that application, then this is by far the better way to do it.
Yeah, definitely. And then going back to like 12-bolt, I've seen one come together, and if you get all the pieces, like John said, a la carte, and you want to put it together, It really kind of takes a specialist to do so, unless you've done it quite a number of times, because syncing up these gears and everything, when you put everything together on a 12 bolt, you got to be like some sort of wizard with shims and all that stuff to get it just right.
Yeah, you need to be a specialist. You need to be able to set up a ring gear, set up backlash, know how those components go together. And a 12 bolt is a little bit more difficult. You're in and out to try to shim everything to make it kind of perfect, right? Whereas with a Ford 9-inch or Currie 9-inch, you can buy a complete third member with the gear already set up, limited slip units already set up. So if you wanted to put it together yourself because you did need to do some manipulation or you wanted to custom paint it, going together is a bolt-on. So it's just nuts and bolts and a little bit of know-how, and you can definitely handle it.
Well, amazing. So one other thing on that I want to find out is now we said about $3,500. You know, is that cost effective for like a modest budget build? I mean, and if somebody's building a budget build, is it worth them buying one of these rear ends and putting them in the truck?
Right, because it is a lump sum up front,
yeah.
And that's sometimes a little bit of a larger nut to swallow. However, when you start thinking about it, well, I won't have to refurbish anything, right? You're not going to have to rebuild anything. You might be able to pull something and then try to cobble it together, but then you're going to end up spending more money over time in the short period of time to make that remotely just something that's going to operate underneath the vehicle, right? So, spending the money on this right up front, you're going to get something that's fully assembled, put together with a warranty that's going to be a bolt-in, and then, really, relatively speaking, even on a budget build, you're probably going to spend double that on a motor, and you're probably going to spend something similar to that on a transmission, right? So this is really the last piece of the pie that needs to go behind all that drivetrain so that you're putting whatever power you want to make to the ground and it's not going to go through something that has the potential of breaking.
Yeah, exactly. You're only as good as your weakest link, and you don't want your rear end to be the weakest link.
Absolutely.
A lot of people don't think about it, but it really is very critical because that's the part that actually makes everything work. Actually gets the power to your rear wheels and all of that. So I think my last little question here is about maintenance. You said you can just throw it in and not really care about it. What about maintenance? Do you have to change out fluid every so often, or how's that go?
So just kind of like your transmission, always a good idea to do a break-in, but the maintenance on it, we put a drain plug right on the bottom of the housing. It takes 3 quarts of gear oil, and you can drain it and easily fill it right from the side of the third member here. So, I always say, do a break-in just like you would say on your motor and your transmission, a few hundred miles. You can drain the gear oil, put new gear oil in it relatively easy without having to take anything apart. So it's just a oil in, oil out. Other than that, everything here is pretty bulletproof. And as far as seals and bearings, well, there's always wearing parts, but I'd say you have thousands and thousands of miles that you can go without having to probably get into anything else.
Yeah, and you're probably going to be better off with one of these setups anyways. If it's all brand new and everything's been checked out. We've got the highest quality standards here and everything. So yeah, it just seems the way to go. And I'm glad that I've got one in my truck. I can't wait to see what it does. So we'll be reporting back on that when that does happen. So
right on, me
all right,
too.
Man. Hey, thanks for making the time, dude.
It's my pleasure.
I know you're a busy
me.
guy and everything,
Absolutely.
but this was great information. I think
Great.
a lot of people can benefit from that. So
yeah,
thank
absolutely.
you.
Thanks for having me, man.
Well, that's pretty much a wrap on this video and our discussion about Ford 9-inch rear ends. If you have any other questions about them or how Currie makes them or anything like that, any specifics, drop that stuff in the comment section below. And yeah, before I get going, I want to ask everybody to please like this video as it helps us produce more in the future. And do make sure that you subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a future video. And we will catch you next time.
Thanks for watching Driving Line. If you guys like this video, consider subscribing to our channel so you'll never miss any of the content we create here. Whether you're into trucks, Jeeps, imports, domestic vehicles, or anything in between, we are here to fuel your passion. So hit that subscribe button and we'll see you guys next time.